What's up, guys? It is Will here, back again, and we are here with Mr. Carlos Viscardo, a place for collecting, the man himself. I don't know what to call you, Carlos. You're the showrunner of the place for collecting. I don't know. That's
Basically like the manager at this point, it
you're the
feels
manager.
like.
You're the Michael Scott of a place for collecting, basically. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess
I just make
I'm
sure
just a
everything's
moderator.
peaceful.
Yeah, I'm just a moderator, bro. So
Yeah,
at this point, I'm more
yeah.
like Dwight at best. So if anything, man.
I
But
mean, it's
anyway,
because you didn't
dude.
want to be an admin, so
Yeah,
it's your
I
fault.
took it. I'm a reluctant hero, dude. I'm basically Han Solo.
There you go.
So with a
There you
cardigan.
go.
But I will say, Carlos, that we are here today to present an exciting new strategy or philosophy, ideology even for collecting that's going to make people's lives a
Right.
lot better and simpler. So, Carlos, I want to kind of share my screen a little bit and just go over this
Sure.
PowerPoint, but I want you to sort of, considering this was your idea, this was your,
Yeah.
tier-based collecting system that you created. I wanted you to kind of give people a little bit of a background into how this came to be and why it came to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, when I got into collecting, I've been collecting on and off, but pretty consistent now for the last 2 to 3 years now. And when I started collecting, my focus was Marvel, Iron Man, Star Wars, RoboCop, really everything, right? Because there were so many things out there that I had never knew were being made. It's by Hot Toys, by 3 customs. There was just a lot of things. That's before I even got into statues, and I realized that there was just a lot. And you, as a new collector or coming back into it, you get overwhelmed pretty quickly. And I feel like a lot of collectors or newbies, we do that, right? We get overly excited. We don't really think about, displays. We don't think about, budgets. We don't really think about, we just buy, and then act later. Well, I eventually ended up having about 260 figures. And I realized like, this is just too much. Like there's a lot of things I don't care about. Talk to you and I said, hey, I'm going to probably have to quit. I don't want to do this. And I didn't end up quitting, but I definitely ended up drastically, um, you know, minimizing my collection. And I went basically to like just Marvel, right? I only care about Marvel. I talked to you about like, I just want to have one of every Marvel character. You and I talked about that's probably not a good idea. And then eventually I was in the same boat where I started saying, well, now I have like 100 figures, but I still feel like it's too much. I'm too much to keep up with. Hot Toys is releasing too many things. There are too many cool things out there. How do I have a focus? And that's when I decided I think if I keep doing the same thing over and over and I'm not seeing any change, right? That's the definition of insanity. So I figured, let me create something. Let me come up with a new strategy because you adapt, right? Or you have to
Yeah.
pivot and change, right? The whole time. So that's what I basically did. And I came up with tier-based collecting and I ran it by you and we both basically perfected it. Or really get close to it, I believe so. So
Yeah.
that's why this was made. So yeah.
Yeah, man. And I think it'll be really helpful for people, Carlos, because I know it's been really helpful for you and I, just even over the last couple weeks, just kind of sort of
Right.
identifying our needs, identifying, the strengths of our collection, sort of what is essential. And I think what's
Right.
really important, Carlos, is like we've talked about the three big things that I think tier-based collecting actually does. And I'm hoping people come into this open-minded because it's super helpful. It helps you define your priorities in terms of which characters are most important to you. It helps reduce the stress because, again, determines those and defines those priorities to help you figure out who is important to you as a character and who you really care about and who's essential to you, right? And then by doing that, you streamline your collection by having something that really represents you, that is full of love, top tier characters, instead of like,
Right.
oh, you know
Right.
what, Bo-Katan's cool, Captain Vaughn, it looks cool, but do I like Captain Vaughn? Do I care about Captain Vaughn? Right. And I think
Right.
that's where this is really going to help people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I would even say those that, are like, well, no, I don't need this, or, for whatever reason you may be hesitant. I would say try this exercise that we're going to show. And I'm almost positive a ton of people are going to say, like, this really made me realize that I have pieces of my collection I don't care about that I thought that I did. You don't need to complete a line. You don't need a lot of things. And this is really going to, fix it for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why, Carlos, in this first slide, I really wanted to address what is TBC, tier based collecting, that's what it stands for, and who is it for. So Like I said, TBC stands for tier-based collecting. That's the title that Carlos and I came up with. It's designed to do the following things. First, help the collector define their priorities. Like I said, determine what characters are most important to you. At the end of the day, what tier-based collecting really focuses on is character. The characters that you love that are the most important characters to you possible. That's just who the characters are and what they represent, and the characters that you just really connect with, you vibe with, right? And then secondly, it greatly reduces or even could eliminate the stress of what to collect. There's so many options, an abundance of options out there, so many cool figures. Everything Hot Toys does is cool to a degree. Everything InArt does is cool. Everything 3.0 does, it's cool looking, right? But do you need it? Right? It's a good deal for you.
Right.
Finally, streamline your collection by differentiating between wants and needs. Wants are very different than needs in collecting. I mean, all of these are truly wants, but as far as what you need in your collection, that's what this is going to help you determine. And this is really the best way to do it. I'm just going to be honest. It really is.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, Carlos, who it's for and can it help me? Because I think people are going to ask, like, is this? I've been collecting for 10 years, 15 years. Is this really, why should I give a shit, basically? Why is this going to affect me? Because it's a suitable strategy for really any collector. Long-term, short-term, whatever. Anyone who wants to collect smarter, simpler, and longer, this is going to help you with that, because you're really going to be able to refine and narrow your focus and be able to collect longer and smarter and not feel overwhelmed and like you're jumping from one figure to the next. These are some very relatable things, Carlos, that I've listed here. If you've ever felt overwhelmed with the abundance of options, there's a ton of good options out there. So many cool figures. If you're going from one figure to the next, very frequently, we all do this, right? This will help you stop doing that and be able to appreciate what you do have and what you do truly love. If you leave figures in the box for extended periods of time, this will help you not do that, because you're not going to buy things that you want to leave in the box, or you'll even be able to leave in the box because you're going to be so excited to actually unpack it. That's a big difference. If you've ever felt stressed due to space and financial concerns, we've all felt that. My space is running out. I'm a little bit stretching my budget too thin, right? We're going to help put a stop to that. If you've ever had an issue determining whether a character is worthy of a purchase for you, then I feel like this, again, is going to help you determine whether they actually are and whether they fit in your collection and whether they are a tier 1 through 4 or whatever, right? And we're going to go into that. But Carlos, I think overall, I mean, I think this is pretty applicable to like almost any collector. Don't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's funny because once I started coming up with TBC and listing some rules as to, you know, how it works and who's it for, during that period of time, I had about 3 or 4 people reach out just randomly, you know, with little stories like, oh, I bought this figure and, you know, I was looking for it. I've been looking forward to it for like months, and I finally got it and I sold it a week later, right? Because what you really cared for, it wasn't the character, it was the chase. And then you get it and you're like, well, you know, it's time to go. Or I've had other people tell me like, yeah, like, you know, this seems like it's just too much, you know, financially, I'm way over my head, and this fixes that problem. This really, if you have an open mind, you know, and you go into this, you're going to realize that TBC will really fix a lot of the problems that you may have, right? Like for me, as far as like, we've only been doing this for a little bit, but I haven't bought, this is the first time that I've actually been appeased with collecting, because every character has been coming out. You know, Hot Toys recently has been doing a ton of things, and the one that really tempted me was Loki, right? You know, you love Loki, and I said, okay, I really want this, so I went and applied it to the system, and I realized, yeah, he's not the lowest tier, but there's other characters that I would rather have that are higher tier that I don't have yet. So he went on my reserves, and we'll talk about what that means, but and now I didn't go spend money on Loki. Things are coming out, and I'm not worried about I need to buy it. Hot Toys can release anything they want. A Hydra Stomper, they can release Captain Jesse or Commander, whoever it is, and it's not really going to impact me. And I think a lot of collectors can finally enjoy collecting and start, which is more importantly, and start enjoying other aspects of life, like, you know, not feeling like they have to keep up with this. So
right. It's much easier to keep up with, for sure, man. Absolutely.
Right.
So And Carlos, I think that's why the second slide I wanted to jump into this and talk about how does TBC actually work. I've mentioned a few times now, TBC prioritizes the love of the character. That's really what this philosophy boils down to. It really prioritizes the love of the character. Which characters do you really care that much about? And when you sit down and actually start, putting some effort into determining that, it's really pretty revealing and eye-opening. And you look at it and you're like, holy shit, like I didn't realize I like this character as much or as little as I actually do.
Right.
So, and you have that in your
Right.
collection. Like I can give the example, Carlos, I have the War Machine and Doctor Strange, right? We'll show a little bit later in my tiers, but those quickly ended up tier 4 for me. And I was like, oh, damn. Like I didn't realize that I liked
Right.
a lot more characters more than them, right? And that's
Right.
what this does. So
Right.
it also,
And
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, exactly. Because then if you're, you have like War Machine and Doctor Strange and I don't know, let's just say Yondu, they're tier 4, and you
Yep.
start saying to yourself, okay, I'll rather have War Machine over Doctor Strange, and I'll rather have Yondu over Doctor Strange. Then that means Doctor Strange isn't tier 4; he might be tier 5, right? So you start
Right.
realizing, like, oh, I really didn't care about him as much as I thought, or he's not as high as a tier. So you can double check that stuff, but. I think this is I'll hand it out back to you, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's true though. And I will say, like, for the second point, it promotes the idea that we really should be choosing characters we love. And that's hard to do without sitting
Right.
down and putting actual thought and effort into who you actually love, right? So I will say, and I put in parentheses here, and this is something that I do want to kind of explain a little bit. This does not mean that the figure can suck ass, right? Because basically,
Right.
I have Legolas as a tier 2 character for me. However, I'm not saying the Asmus sucks ass, but it's not up to my standards of what I want a Legolas to be. That means that I do not have to buy that Legolas, right? Because he's tier 2 for me, but that doesn't mean that we're going to purchase him right away. And to go over the tiers, let's talk about how they actually break down. There's 6 of them, really. I mean, there could be more, really, but after 6, it starts to probably become a little bit unnecessary. So, tier 1, characters that you absolutely love. Carlos, I should probably let you do this. Go over the tiers for us, because these are the tiers that you came up with. So, what do they mean?
Yeah, so tier 1 is pretty straightforward. Tier, characters that you love, figures or a character that you must have in your collection. An example for me, Iron Man. Everyone knows I love Iron Man, The Mandalorian. They're gonna be in my collection, even if whatever happens, I'm gonna have some form of them. Tier 2 are critical. Figures are critical to your collection. You almost love, right? They're like right at borderline. So if like love is like 9 and up, right? This is like an 8.9. You really feel like this is really critical to your collection. Something for me that would be like Black Suit Superman. Really important, but I don't love necessarily as much as Iron Man. Tier 3 would be characters that are really your favorite. For me, that would be a Yondu, right? So really great characters, but again, they're not critical. Tier 4 are characters you like. For me, that would be a Vision. Tier 5 are characters that are okay, like a Taskmaster. And tier 6 are characters you don't really care for. It doesn't mean you hate them. You just don't care for them for whatever reason. Like, let's say Captain Vaughn comes out, and I'm like, well, Captain Vaughn looks pretty cool. And I put him in the tier system, and I realize, oh, I don't really care about him. So I'm not really going to even, deal with Captain Vaughn. It doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean they're trash. It just means you don't care for them at that moment of grading them. So,
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And like people know about me, like tier 1 would be Loki, Pennywise, Kylo Ren, right? Joel, Ellie. Tier 2 is going to be more like Legolas, Sauron, things like that. So it's going to be interesting to kind of address these tiers and kind of see where people's characters end up when you sit down and really put a lot of thought into considering where they fall, right? Let's give an example, and we can share my Excel doc that I will give kind of a baseline example of in the description below.
Sure.
So when you guys are watching this, you'll get it's all in the document. It'll be a Google Sheets document that you can edit and that you can make your own, just kind of like you'll see here on screen. So this will be something that you'll be able to access. It'll just be in the description below and a link so you can make your own. So at that point, Carlos, what you can see here, I took all the figures that I currently have in my possession, or figures that I know exist or will exist because they have been announced, right? So what I did was, and I marked them with a check mark depending upon what tier I considered them to be. So what you can see here, this is the best way Google Sheets let us sort of organize this, but like in tier 1, you can see at the middle to bottom of the screen there, right? You can see Pennywise, and I put him twice because I bought 2 InArt Pennywises. So that's a good example. If you have 2 of that figure, you will have to mark it twice. And that's where it will make you really determine, hey, I only have room for 50 to 75 figures if I do this, right? Depending upon the space in my home. And do I really need 2 Pennywises? This is something I've thought about and will continue to think about, whether it's tier 1 or not. If it were not a tier 1 character, then you're damn sure I'm not getting 2, right? So it would have to be pretty high character. But Carlos, the same process kind of goes for you too, right? Like as far as like, if you're going to buy multiples of a character or dedicate, say, get Carnage, right? A big figure, he better be a pretty good tier because he's going to take up a lot of space, right?
Right, exactly. So when it comes down to tier systems and ranking everything, you want to make sure that whoever, so if you're going to have the InArt Joker and you're only going to display one of them and you're going to leave one in the box, then you only have to mark them once. But if your plan is to display both, yes, like Will said, you're going to have to list both figures out, because at the end, you want to know exactly how many figures you have. You want to know exactly, how they're going to rank across everything. For example, for me, I used to be and I still am a huge Iron Man fan. And there are so many suits to mark, 5, 3, and so many. And it made me realize, like, I do love Iron Man, but I don't also want to dedicate 10 spaces to only Iron Man. If you love clones and if you want to build an army, great. You're gonna dedicate a certain percentage of your collection to this, because, and we'll go over this, but tier collecting only works if you're restricted to a certain number of figures. And we will talk about this a little bit more, but essentially for me, that's 50 figures. So if I'm saying, hey, I want to have mark 1 through 7, or or my top 10 Iron Man suits, I'm dedicating 20% of my collection to just Iron Man. And then once you only have 40 to go, you'll realize there's just so many characters out there that you really do care about because of the tier system. And it made me realize all I need is 2 Iron Men, and I don't want to have more than that because there's so many other things. So that's what the tier system is going to do, and I think it's really going to help. But yeah, you can definitely list out everything that you're going to be getting.
Yep, 100%. And I want to share the details, and we can go. I'm going to share, actually, once we complete this slide, Carlos, I'm going to share my actual Google Sheets doc that I can share with people. But going into the details here, so if you only collect 1/6, obviously it's going to be a little bit different for you. You should have a spreadsheet that details everything we just talked about, like every figure that you currently own, every figure that has been announced or previewed that you are considering picking up, and you got to mark it in your tiers, right? It should contain the following things. Like I said, figures currently in your collection, that's super important because you got to know what you have and what type of space you're working with and how many figures you can still obtain reasonably, right? Figures that are announced that you're considering, like I mentioned, you got to have those figures that are like, the Nazgul from InArt, right? They said that they are going to do that. They already put that on their list. Daenerys, right? Jon Snow, stuff like that. Those are figures that we have not seen yet, but they already announced that they are being made. You can go ahead and add them to your list and mark them in the appropriate tier that you would deem them to be, necessary for. Reserves. We're going to show that. Reserves essentially are figures you're still undecided on. If they are even announced, I've done this, Carlos may be different, but say it's like Iron Man Mark III 2.0, as you can see here. These are the reserves that you can see here on the picture on the screen. So some of these figures have not even been announced yet. For example, like Predator Prey. We have no idea if anyone's going to make that. Another Avengers Hulk, no idea. Terminator Endoskeleton, talking about like maybe an InArt. That's the way I'm viewing that, right? Witch King, Night King. I'm talking about InArt still. T-1000, Dark Knight Bane. That could be Hot Toys or InArt. We don't know that those are going to exist yet. Joel and Ellie, same kind of deal. Could be 3-0, could be InArt. We don't know. Jon Snow, same deal, right? So with that, we're just going to have to see how that's going to shake out. But if you collect statues, you got to have that separately, which I will show. And Carlos, I'm going to share this real quick. I'm going to share my screen and share my document. I've zoomed in 200% here. And you can see I got a lot of stuff. I got my sales. I got my current collection, my refund. I won't bother you guys with that, especially since that's so personal anyway. But I will say, based on the tiers here, you can see, Carlos, I've listed everything out by tier, and you can sort. When you get this document, you'll be able to sort. You can go up here to the top, click sort A to Z, and it'll put all that tier to the top, right? So, and you can see here, I listed everything out. I'm at 65 figures because this top line is counting, right? So that's about my max personally, but yours may differ. So Carlos, is yours kind of similar to this?
Yeah, so mine is about, like I said, 50, but say it one more time, in the description below, you're going to have a link where you can duplicate this. So you can have all this is already going to be taken care of for you. So you don't have to go and create a new tier or I'm sorry, a new form or anything. We've done that.
Yep.
The main tiers. So this is the reserve here on the bottom. Will is showing it, but on the main tier, just to again say it, anything that's been announced. So there's anything that's been announced, anything that is on pre-order or they've said we will make this, right? This can go here. Anything that you're hoping it comes out good or you're hoping by a specific company, it will be in the reserves. And you can see that on the very bottom, Will has another tab and it says reserves. So an example, and I would just, re-say this again, is that let's say Night King, Witch King, right? All these different ones. 3.0 has made a Night King, right? But if you don't really like the quality of the Night King and you're waiting for something else, go on ahead and add them on the reserves. It's just basically it's telling you, I want this one, but only from InArt or only from a different company, right? That's all it's really telling you. So it's in the reserves, or it can be a wish list. Like for me, it's going to be some characters like Goku and Dragon Ball Z stuff that that's going to be in there. So that would be essentially the reserves.
Yeah. And like Carlos, for example, the way I'm kind of viewing it, like Pop Toys made that Scorpion figure, right? I'm hoping they now make that Sub-Zero, and Sub-Zero is a tier 1 character for me. So that would be something that would be pretty much an immediate pickup. If you have a tier 1 character, that's pretty much no questions asked, basically, as far as 1.6 goes. I mean, there's other factors in terms of price, whatever, quality, but as far as tier 1, those are pretty integral characters to your collection. Same with tier 2, they're critical, but they're not absolutely essential, but they're pretty critical. So you can see there, I got Witch King, T1000, Bane, so forth. Yeah.
And your 1.6 tab, so Will's gonna have things like Aragorn and Legolas. Again, haven't been shown, but they're there because he wants them, assuming that they're gonna come out good.
Yep, exactly. And like, for example, I don't know if I had other ones in there. Chrome Beskar Mando, right? We already know that one's been announced.
It's a pre-order, right?
Right, exactly. Cad Bane. The Darth Vader DX, like John Wick, Shang-Chi Wenwu, like stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of how that process tends to go. And like I said, for the statue collectors out there, I have the same kind of deal, right? I don't have a reserves tab yet. Or I do actually, sorry, I didn't think I had gotten that far, but I did, right? So I have a reserve statue for statues that I hope are made. I hope Prime 1 makes these, right? Loki 1/2, Queen could make that. Sub-Zero, maybe Prime's going to make that one they teased. But I have my statue tiers for the ones I actually have in my collection currently, right? So that's kind of how, same process, same how it goes. So, anyway, back to the PowerPoint. That's how the details tend to go. Let's talk about some guidelines. So Carlos, I know this will be really important. We talked about a couple times now, 50 to 75 figures per collector. That's just what we recommend to keep it reasonable, especially if you're collecting any other scales at all. You have a minimum amount of a maximum amount of space, rather a finite amount of space that you can contribute to collecting. And there's so many other things that we want to contribute space to in our homes, right? You want your house not to be taken over necessarily, like a museum. Like you can have so much room for other things. So like I said, once you hit your maximum number of figures, whatever you determine that to be, what we recommend is in that 50 to 75 range, but everyone's going to be different. One must be sold to purchase a new one. You have to make space somehow. So when you start maxing out and you hit that 65, you're like, well, or that 75, you're like, well, I have 75. I gotta get rid of something, right? That's the decisions that you're going to have to make. So leaving a little bit of wiggle room from time to time might be good. Carlos, I know the next point, we talked about this, and we talked about these next two even today. So statues 1/4 scale and larger, and vehicles. So statues 1/4 scale and larger, they take up real estate, they take up time, they take up money. So we all know this. I've lost lots of money selling statues that I ended up not loving as much, right? They have to be a tier 1 or tier 2 character because of the amount that you're investing into them and the space that you are investing to actually display them. So 1/4 scale and higher, they can be pretty big. So they have to be tier 1 or tier 2.
And the resale.
Yeah, and the resale. That's the money part of it. Because like with Joaquin, I could share with people, like I paid retail for that Prime 1 Joaquin, sold it for about half of what I paid for it. So that's just tends to be how sometimes they can go. Some statues go up in value, sometimes they don't. That one's still in stock, so that's how that one goes, right? Vehicles, Carlos, I know you can speak to this one. 1/4 scale and larger, they got to be associated with a tier 1 or tier 2 character. Do you tend to agree with that, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, for example, let's say that you grew up with the Back to the Future, but you're not the biggest DeLorean fan, and you're like, DeLorean's cool. But when you do the tiers, you realize, yeah, this is like a tier 4. Like I like the DeLorean,
Right.
and I like Back to the Future. Then don't buy a DeLorean just because it's cool to have a DeLorean. Buy it if it's in a tier 1 or tier 2, because like Will said, vehicles, statues, they're really difficult to resell, especially in this economy. So because of that, you don't want to be stuck selling a high priced item that you're gonna take the biggest loss. So yes, vehicles 100%. Even honestly, even the small vehicles. Oh, like this is a speeder, and I really want the speeder. Put them on a tier system, and I guarantee you, you're really gonna, it's gonna clear things up for you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, bro. And there's a couple other rules or guidelines here to keep in mind. Do not purchase tier 6 characters. If you look at a character and determine, you know what, this is tier 6, it's not really beating some of the other characters out that are already in my collection or that I'm planning to buy. Tier 6 characters and on, even tier 5 characters are questionable. They should only be purchased when space is readily available. Like you have a lot, say you're a newer collector or you just moved on from a bunch of stuff, you're going to limit yourself to 50 figures and you have 5 figures right now, right? You have a little more room for tier 5 at that point. Doesn't mean you have to fill that space right now, but you have a little more flexibility essentially.
Right.
Yeah. So Carlos, just to wrap things up here, why should people consider TBC? So the first thing, like we talked about, it'll make your process simpler, your collecting processes simpler, and greatly reduce your stress because it's greatly going to help you determine what's important to you. And without really sitting down to think about what's important to you, again, the analogy I've always given is the one the Joker gives. We're a dog chasing cars. That's what we are, right? We're chasing after the next car that excites us. That's what we are until you sit down and think about, do I want to chase that car, right? There's this car in front of me that I like more. So that's kind of how it works. Secondly, will help you determine which characters are the most important to you. You're going to figure out, is this a Pennywise, a Loki, a Kylo Ren, a Joker for you, right? Like it is for me. What's important to you? Maybe Captain Vaughn is that for you. Maybe he's not, but you're going to have to sit down and think about that. It will also help you reduce clutter and maximize your space efficiently. We all have a finite amount of space. Sometimes we want to expand that space, but it's not usually practical based on the other obligations in life that we have. And finally, it will help you really, truly appreciate the figures that you actually collect to a much stronger degree, because for them to have made the cut to make it into your collection, they had to be pretty damn good. Not just good figures, but good characters. So Carlos, anyway, do you have any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's go back to the guidelines really quickly because I wanted to mention a couple things possible. So the first one, right, the 50 to 75 figures. I want to expand on this a little bit. So it's not that we're telling people that we wanted you to have a small collection, but the reality is that there's been plenty of times, and I've done this, like I'm like, oh, I don't want to go out to eat, or I don't want to do that, or I don't want to buy this because that's an NRD. That's a figure. I don't want to spend that money. We've all done it. Joke. Exactly. So 50 to 75 should be your max. You have Magic cases, you can have Apex Time, you can have whatever you want. That should really be your max. If you have like 200, 300 figures right now, and you go and say, well, I'm going to still keep them all, I'm just going to do the tier system, this is not going to work for you. This is so you can have a nice collection of about a 75. If you happen to have like a massive room, like a 30 by 30, just a really huge room, then maybe you can extend it to 100. But that should be your absolute max. Because again, it's not that we're saying, hey, we're recommending because you want to be able to have a smaller collection that you love. Again, 75 is still a lot though. But it allows you to do other things. Like an example would be, I felt like I always had to spend money on collecting, and now I went and bought like Disneyland passes, but because I no longer have that figure I'm chasing, right? That would be an example for me. Or instead of saying, well, I'm gonna buy a figure, now you have funds to go, take your wife on a date or go on dates or just explore other things. Like for you, buying a Sonos Arc soundbar, you know what I mean?
Which I didn't do yet, but I should.
Didn't do, but it gives you freedom to say, I no longer chase the next thing. Collecting is important to me, but it's not everything for me. And I think this is what it does. So you do need to have some sort of max number. Again, we recommend 50 to 75. If you just happen to have a massive room, it's 100. And one last thing is that when you're doing this, you're kind of collecting backwards through the Excel sheet. So instead of saying I have 300 figures, right, and I'm going to just sell off as I go, because the Excel sheet makes you list items that are in pre-order or that have even teased or announced, whatever it may be. You're collecting through the Excel sheet and then making your purchases, as opposed to buying first and then, ranking those tiers. So anyway,
you're working through it before you buy, not after. Yeah.
Right, exactly, right. So you're building your like, for example, I have about 25, 30 figures, and the other 20 in my collection are all things that are haven't been released, like a Chrome Mando, or haven't been even shown yet, but they've been announced, like a Legolas and an Aragorn, right? But they're in my 50, but I technically only have like 30 right now in my collection. So that's the way you would do it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
that's pretty much
absolutely
all I
makes
have,
sense, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it really is, like I said, everyone's going to be different. This may not be for some people, but I do feel like this
Right,
is going to be
right.
something that helps a lot of collectors out that maybe sometimes feel a little bit overwhelmed and lost, because I think we've all literally felt that as collectors. Like sometimes we're like, oh
Right.
my God, it's so much to keep up with. There's this one. And then we talk about the storms, right? There's this storm and that storm, and then everything's dropping. This mitigates all that storm stuff. You have the perfect
100%.
umbrella essentially, because you're like,
Yeah.
well, I don't give a shit about the storm unless all my tier 1 characters are releasing at the same time, maybe then, but it's unlikely, right? Highly
Unlikely.
unlikely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I think
yeah.
also, and what I was going to say, I think what it also does is that, whatever's really going on in the outside world, the economy or whatever it is, because you're not buying figures left and right. When an emergency happens, you don't have to sell your figures because you're not buying consistently. You're really taking your time. So, like you said, a storm can
Yeah.
happen, the economy can happen, and it really will minimize your impact, if not at all, if or maybe even, just get rid of it completely, where it's just not even something you worry about. So yeah, I think TBC, and I will say that even if you feel like, yeah, this is not for me, I don't want to do it, I still recommend do the list and keep your, like, let's say you have 200 figures, 300 figures, and you're like, there's no way. Just try it. Try it
Yeah.
out. Stick to the 75, the highest end of what we would allow. Again, unless you have or not that we would allow, but biggest recommendation we feel like, so you can have a balanced life. If you have a massive room, right, maybe 100, but just do the exercise and keep yourself to 75 just for fun. I think you're going to
Yeah.
discover a lot about yourself and about your collection. And who knows, you might end up realizing that there's something else you want to start doing. So,
Yeah, I think so. So, guys, definitely, like I said, check out the link in the description to the Google Sheets. That will help you sort of, if you want to, do this first document. Like I said, everything we've all talked about is like, this is just something that we wanted to share with people that has helped us. So there's no incentive for us to share this other than to help other people. So it's not like
right.
we want anything from anyone. It's literally just, you can have this document, do what you will with it. And just these guidelines, I think, are super helpful just to maintain what we consider to be, I guess, healthy collecting. That definition is obviously subjective, right? But at
Right.
the same time, this is just something that we feel has helped us. So maybe it can help other people too. So why not share it? So,
Exactly.
yeah. So we thank you guys for listening so much. And yeah, like I said, check out the doc in the description below. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And other than that, Carlos, do you have any closing thoughts for this one, dude?
No, I'm just excited to see what the community is going to say. Hopefully, everyone comes into it with an open mind. And like I said, man, there's just so many reasons, right? So
Yeah.
if you're feeling stressed out financially, whatever it may be, I'm excited. Hopefully, the community takes this positively, and and hopefully if you try it out. So I'm excited to see what
Yeah.
people's going to say.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.